What if a cartoon from over 30 years ago already knew what 2026 would bring? Not guesses, not coincidences, because the predictions from The Simpsons keep coming true. Again and again. And the ones that have not happened yet, they are set for right now. 2026 is here. This is not a theory, this is a warning. For 35 years, The Simpsons has quietly hidden predictions and jokes and background meet-them moments so accurate they have unsettled people across the world. Smartwatches, video calls, the Trump presidency, a global pandemic, even scientific discoveries, all predicted by a cartoon family in Springfield. But it goes deeper. The show does not just predict events, it predicts how they feel. The fear, the chaos, the moment people wonder how everything went wrong. And that feeling is coming back. Across episodes from the 1990s to now, there are clues pointing toward 2026. Some subtle, some chillingly precise. Together, they form a picture that is hard to ignore. We are counting down 10 of the most unsettling predictions for 2026, ending with one that could change how you see everything. The machine that takes your job, it begins quietly. It always does. In a Season 8 episode, Homer is replaced at the nuclear power plant by an automated system. A machine. Mr. Burns celebrates. Homer is discarded. And for a few minutes, the show plays it for laughs. But underneath the joke, there is something ice-cold happening. The machine does not just take the job, it takes Homer's identity. His purpose, his reason for getting up in the morning. In 2026, artificial intelligence is no longer a futuristic concept discussed at technology conferences. It is inside hospitals, law firms, newsrooms, banks, creative agencies. It is writing code, diagnosing patients, generating contracts, and producing music. And the pace is not slowing down. It is accelerating at a rate that economists are struggling to even model properly. The World Economic Forum has projected that tens of millions of white-collar jobs could be displaced by automated systems within the next 3 years. Not factory jobs, not manual labor, your job, my job. The jobs that people spent 4 years in university preparing for. The Simpsons showed us the emotional truth of that moment decades before it arrived. And in 2026, millions of people are beginning to feel exactly what Homer felt. Not just unemployed, replaced. The question is not whether machines will take more jobs this year. They will. The question is whether society is even remotely prepared for what happens next. The food that is not food. There is an episode where the citizens of Springfield begin consuming a processed food product so engineered, so artificial, that it bears almost no relationship to anything that once grew in the ground or walked the earth. The joke is that it tastes incredible. The reality underneath that joke is deeply disturbing. Because in 2026, we are living inside that episode. Lab-grown meat is now being commercially introduced across multiple countries. Ultra-processed foods now make up the majority of caloric intake in several developed nations. And the global food supply chain, already fractured by climate events and geopolitical tensions, is being quietly restructured by a handful of enormously powerful corporations. A small number of companies now control the seeds, the fertilizer, the distribution networks, and increasingly the alternative protein sources that are being positioned as the future of food. What you eat, where it comes from, and what it actually contains is becoming less and less transparent. The Simpsons did not just predict that food would change, it predicted that people would eat whatever they were given and call it progress. And the scariest part of this prediction is not the food itself, it is the acceptance. The way Springfield simply shrugged and moved on. The way people in 2026 are doing exactly the same thing. The screen that watches back. In a Season 10 episode, the family installs a smart home system that begins monitoring their every move. The device listens to their conversations, it anticipates their needs before they express them, and slowly, almost imperceptibly, it begins making decisions for the family rather than simply responding to them. The episode was considered absurd satire in 1998. It is called Tuesday in 2026. Smart speakers, smart televisions, smart doorbells, smart refrigerators. The average connected home now contains dozens of devices that are actively listening, recording, processing, and transmitting data about your behavior around the clock. In the last 2 years alone, multiple major technology companies have faced legal action over the unauthorized recording of private conversations through their smart home devices. Courts in Europe and North America have begun grappling with questions about who legally owns the data generated inside your own home. The answer, in most cases, is not you. And here's the detail that makes the Simpsons episode feel less like comedy and more like prophecy. In the show, the family does not fight the system. They complain briefly. They make a few jokes, and then they simply adapt to being watched. Sound familiar? The sky that turned against us. There's a recurring visual in The Simpsons that most viewers stopped noticing years ago. The sky above Springfield is wrong. The color is wrong. The air feels thick and heavy in ways that the animators have made increasingly explicit over the decades. Nuclear waste seeps into rivers. Fish mutate. Seasons arrive at the wrong time. For 30 years, audiences laughed at the environmental absurdity of Springfield. Then in 2025, wildfires burned through regions that had never experienced wildfires before. Flooding devastated cities that had not seen flood events in recorded history. Temperatures in parts of the Middle East and South Asia reached levels that scientists describe as approaching the boundary of human survivability. 2026 is already being flagged by climate monitoring organizations as a year of continued escalation. The jet stream is behaving in ways that were considered theoretical a decade ago. Ocean temperatures are running at record levels. And the feedback loops that climate scientists have warned about for 30 years are beginning to visibly accelerate. The Simpsons did not make fun of climate change. It showed you what it looks like when a society knows something is broken and collectively decides to keep living as if it is not. Springfield knows the plant is poisoning the river. Springfield keeps fishing in it anyway. Look around. Tell me that does not sound exactly like where we are right now. The leader who should not exist. By now, most people know about the Trump prediction. Season 11. The year 2000. Lisa Simpson becomes president and inherits a financial crisis left behind by President Trump. It aired 15 years before he descended that escalator. It used his name, his face, his exact cultural identity as a billionaire celebrity turned political figure. But here's what the conversation around that prediction always misses. The episode was not really about Trump. It was about the conditions that make someone like Trump possible. A society so saturated with celebrity culture, so disconnected from traditional political institutions, so hungry for disruption, that it would hand ultimate power to someone who had never held public office. Those conditions have not gone away. In 2026, they have intensified. Across multiple continents, the pattern is repeating. Outsider candidates, celebrity-adjacent figures, business people with no government experience, positioning themselves as the only ones who can fix systems that the establishment has broken. And in several major democracies, they are winning. The Simpsons did not predict one man, it predicted a template. A recurring glitch in the political operating system of modern democracies. And that glitch is running again right now, in multiple countries simultaneously. The war that started with a tweet. There is an episode where a global conflict begins not on a battlefield, not in a government chamber, but through a cascade of media misunderstandings. A joke is taken seriously, a satirical story is reported as fact, and before anyone can correct the record, the machinery of international crisis has already been set in motion. The writers thought they were being absurd. In 2026, information warfare is the front line of every geopolitical conflict on Earth. Deepfake video technology can now convincingly simulate world leaders delivering speeches they never gave. Artificial intelligence tools can generate photographic evidence of events that never happened. State-sponsored social media operations are now sophisticated enough to shift public opinion in target countries within 72 hours. The International Crisis Group has documented cases where disinformation campaigns directly contributed to escalations of real military conflict in the last 3 years alone. The thing that makes this Simpsons parallel so deeply unsettling is that the show understood something before the internet even existed at mass scale. It understood that in a world where information moves faster than truth, reality becomes negotiable. And when reality becomes negotiable, anything can happen. 2026 is a year with more ongoing armed conflicts than any year since the Second World War, and almost every single one of them has a disinformation component that is making resolution harder. The cartoon was not predicting a specific war. It was predicting the world where any war can start at any moment, because nobody can agree on what is actually real. The corporation that became the government. Mr. Burns has always been the villain of The Simpsons, but look more carefully at what he actually represents. He does not just own a company. He controls the media. He controls the local government. He controls the food and energy supply of an entire town. He can block out the sun, and when he tries to do exactly that, the legal and political systems of Springfield are entirely powerless to stop him. Critics called Burns a cartoon caricature, a ridiculous exaggeration. Then look at the 2020s. A handful of technology and energy companies now hold more economic power than most sovereign nations. The combined market capitalization of the 5 largest technology firms exceeds the gross domestic product of every country on Earth except the United States and China. These companies operate across national boundaries in ways that make traditional government regulation almost impossible to apply consistently. In 2026, multiple governments are engaged in active legal battles with technology corporations over who ultimately controls the digital infrastructure that modern society runs on. The outcome of those battles will determine whether democratic governments retain meaningful authority over the digital lives of their citizens. And here's where The Simpsons gets darkly prophetic. In every episode where Springfield tries to hold Burns accountable, he finds a way to survive. He adapts. He uses his resources to outlast the opposition. He smiles and continues. No prediction in this video is more relevant to 2026 than this one, The Eyes in Space. In a Season 9 episode, an object approaches Earth. The response from government and media is initially to suppress the information, to manage public perception, to decide for ordinary people what they are ready to know. For decades, this was a throwaway plot, disposable satire aimed at Cold War-era paranoia. Then in 2023, the United States Congress held formal hearings on unidentified anomalous phenomena. Military pilots testified under oath about encounters with objects exhibiting flight characteristics that no known human technology can produce. Former intelligence officials stated publicly that retrieval programs for non-human materials have existed for decades. In 2025, the conversation escalated further. Multiple allied governments began coordinating on disclosure frameworks. The Vatican made a statement. NASA established a dedicated research directorate. In 2026, this conversation is no longer fringe. It is institutional, and the question being asked in the halls of power is no longer whether something unknown is operating in our skies. The question is what to tell the public and when. The Simpsons episode was not really about aliens. It was about the gap between what governments know and what citizens are permitted to know. It was about the decision-making process that happens behind closed doors when the information is considered too destabilizing to release. That gap is not closing. In 2026, it is wider than it has ever been. The virus that came back. Before we get to the most unsettling prediction of all, we have to talk about the one that already happened, because it is happening again, and almost nobody is paying attention. The Simpsons predicted a deadly viral outbreak spreading from Asia to the rest of the world in an episode that aired in 2010. The detail that made epidemiologists go quiet when this resurfaced in 2020 was not just the prediction of a pandemic, it was the prediction of the response. The panic buying, the misinformation, the way governments initially downplayed the threat, the way ordinary people were caught completely unprepared. All of it was there, 10 years early. But here's what the viral clip that spread in 2020 always cut away before you could see. Later in the same season, there is a reference to a second outbreak, a mutation, a return. In 2026, health monitoring systems in multiple countries are tracking the evolution of several respiratory pathogens with pandemic potential. The World Health Organization has issued formal guidance to member states about preparing for a Disease X scenario. Global vaccine manufacturing infrastructure, which was dramatically scaled up during the last pandemic, is now being repositioned and retooled. Scientists are not saying another pandemic is inevitable in 2026, but they are imposing it. They are saying the conditions that produce pandemics have not improved. In most measurable ways, they have gotten worse. The show predicted the first wave. It may have already predicted what comes next. The one they hid in plain sight, this is the one that changes everything. Across multiple episodes spanning 3 decades, The Simpsons has returned again and again to a single, quiet, devastating image: Springfield in the future. And in that future, the world still exists. Life continues. But something fundamental has shifted. The community has fractured. People have retreated into smaller and smaller groups. Communication between those groups has essentially stopped, and nobody remembers exactly how it happened, or when the moment was that it became irreversible. There is no single episode that contains this prediction. It is scattered across dozens of them, embedded in the texture of future-set storylines like a recurring nightmare. And in 2026, that image is no longer fiction. Political polarization in democracies across the world has now reached levels where researchers describe societies as existing in parallel realities. People are not just disagreeing about policy, they are disagreeing about facts, about history, about what words were to mean, about what reality, if reality is. Artificial intelligence is accelerating this process by serving each person a perfectly curated information environment that confirms everything they already believe and challenges nothing. Social media algorithms have been optimized not for truth, but for engagement. And the content that generates the most engagement is content that produces outrage, fear, and tribal identity reinforcement. The Simpsons did not predict this as a dramatic apocalypse. It did not show you missiles or floods or robots. It showed you something far more frightening. It showed you neighbors who stopped talking, families who drifted apart, a town that forgot what it used to be. It showed you a society that did not end with a bang. It ended with everyone turning away from each other and retreating into their separate screens. Look at your own life in 2026. Look at the conversations you are no longer having. Look at the people you have stopped listening to. Look at the newsfeed you have curated so carefully that nothing in it ever surprises you. Tell me that is not already happening. Tell me that cartoon from 30 years ago was not describing right now. Here is what makes The Simpsons genuinely terrifying as a cultural artifact. It was never trying to predict the future. The writers have said this repeatedly. They were trying to satirize the present. They were holding up a mirror to the world as it was and exaggerating what they saw, just enough to make it funny. But satire only works when there is distance between the joke and the reality. When the gap closes, the joke stops being funny. And the gap between Springfield and the world you are living in right now has never been smaller. The show has been predicting our world not because its writers have special knowledge, but because the patterns of human behavior, corporate greed, political fragility, and technological overreach that they were satirizing 30 years ago have continued in exactly the direction they were always heading. Nobody changed course. Nobody slowed down. Nobody looked at the mirror the show was holding up and decided to become something different. And so the predictions kept coming true. 2026 is not a year when the Simpsons predictions end. It is a year when several of the most consequential ones are arriving simultaneously. Artificial intelligence reshaping labor, climate systems destabilizing, information environments fracturing, corporate power eclipsing democratic authority, and something vast and unacknowledged moving in the background of the official story that governments are telling their citizens. The question the show has always been asking is not what is going to happen. The question is what you are going to do with the warning. If this video made you stop and think, even for a moment, that is what it was designed to do. Share this with someone who needs to see it, not to frighten them, but because the conversations we are not having are the ones that matter most. Drop in the comments which prediction disturbed you the most, and if you think there is a Simpsons prediction for 2026 that we missed, tell us, because this show has more buried in it than any single video can contain. Subscribe if you want to keep going deeper, because there is so much more to uncover, and the next one is even darker than this.